So we'll be taking your questions throughout. So if you would like to ask any questions for the team, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and that will let me see your questions. We may not have time for them all, or if there are redundant questions, we will combine them. But if you're sending us a question, we would love to know where you are joining us from. So please include your first name and where you're calling in from. All right, so we're going to get started with introductions. I think we'll start. Why don't we start with Will on the left?
Hello, my name is Will Armentrout. I'm an astronomer here at the observatory, and I'm also the 20-meter project scientist. So I'm one of the links between the technical side of running the telescope and the scientific side and the education pieces also. My role in this journey was to do a lot of the coordination and make sure that we can get all these telescope pieces from Norway to Green Bank in one piece.
I'm Edgar Friel. I'm the lead telescope mechanic here at GBO. And my role in this adventure was removing the mechanical parts off the telescope and getting them ready to be packed up and shipped.
Hello, my name is Anthony Musilli. I'm the technical manager for telescope maintenance. On this trip, I assisted Edgar on taking down the mechanical, and I also dealt with all the electronics, taking those pieces apart so we can get them shipped back. I'm Adam Taylor. I'm the maintenance division head as well as the machine shop or mechanical division head here at Green Bank. In my normal role and on the trip, I was primarily working with anything that needed done as far as packing materials up and getting it ready to go.
Hi, I'm Brenda Gregory. Here at Green Bank, I'm a scientific data analyst. And then in Ny-Ålesund, I was keeping track of everything that we were putting in the shipping containers so that we had the documentation for customs so that it could come back to the United States.
Excellent. Thank you all. And Sue Ann, would you like to introduce yourself very briefly as well?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Ann. I didn't go to Norway. Boo. But I'm going to do a little demo with you with a 20-meter telescope at the end.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue Ann. Thanks for joining us. All right. So we're just going to get started here with a discussion. I'd like to, I think we'll start off with just a little bit of a summary of why you all went to Norway, but then we'd also like to hear a little bit about some of the adventure of the trip. It's been pretty fun hearing about some of the less work-related things you were up to as well. So we're going to mix it up a little bit throughout here. But I think maybe just starting off with a quick summary of why you were going. And Will, I think maybe that you might be the most appropriate person to start us off with that.
Sure. So our 20-meter telescope is currently mostly used for educational programs, some of which Sue Ann will tell you about at the end. But it was built primarily to be used for experiments called geodesy. So the Earth wobbles on its axis a little bit whenever it's rotating around. And if you want GPS systems to work, you have to understand that wobble of the Earth on its axis. So we use telescopes all around the world to measure that. And so that's why the 20-meter was originally built. We haven't done that work for almost 20 years now. But at the same time that ours was built, one was built in Norway, up in Svalbard, in Ny-Ålesund. And it has continued to do that kind of work up until just a couple weeks ago. So that telescope was built at the same time as ours. It had all the same pieces, but we don't really have many spares. Their telescope was going to be decommissioned and tore down. So we asked if we could go and basically harvest all of the spare parts we could from that instrument. And they told us, yes, they're happy to have their telescope live a second life basically here in Green Bank. And so we went up, took down those spare parts and are going to use them here for anything that could have been a catastrophe before, where if we have a motor that goes out or a gearbox that goes out, that would have put us offline for 6 months to a year probably. So that would have been a really big deal. Now we have all these spare components and we could just take a week or so, slot it back in and be back up and running. So that was the impetus for the trip, basically getting all of these spare pieces that will keep the 20-meter here in Green Bank running for a long, long time.
Excellent. Thanks, Will. So I've got an image here. I think maybe I will just screen share very briefly just to show you some of the landscape that they were heading to. So here is this, I believe, is the 20-meter at Ny-Ålesund. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I'd be curious to hear from each of you. When you got there, the landscape here is pretty different from here in Green Bank, West Virginia. I'm curious what your first we're not in Kansas anymore moment might have been when you arrived at the observatory.
We'll start.
I think it was just amazing the beauty of, there's no trees, nothing, no grass really, but just the beauty of everything was amazing. Saw it the first time.
Yeah, I think what Edgar said, the fact that there's no trees, it's very hard to judge how big something is or distances, and everything's very it's just daunting looking at it. So it's staggering and stark, but it's beautiful in its own respect. So I think there's few places that I've ever been that made me feel little, and there I truly felt feel little because it's so big. It's an amazing place.
I think my best comparison would be for most Americans, Alaska is kind of the last frontier. And I think for a lot of Europe, Svalbard in general is the Alaska of Europe. It's a very special place. It's hard to get to. A lot of it's untouched. It's unbelievable.
For me, it was being able to have 24 hours of daylight while we were there to be able to see the landscape. Because no matter what time of day, you could look out and just see the glaciers and the bay. And so for me, that was pretty amazing because when we were working all day, we were able to actually see things at night. And usually back home, you wouldn't be able to see as much. So that was pretty fantastic.
And for me, it was just the fact that for the first week and a half that we were there, the sun didn't go down at all, right? So we get off work, we have dinner, we go maybe work a little bit longer. And by that time, the sun should be getting down. You should be getting tired, maybe, as it wasn't the case, right? It really didn't start to set until almost the time we were ready to leave. And even then, it was just down for a couple of minutes. So it never truly got dark when we were there.
Means you can work around the clock, right? 24
That's
hours
right.
workday. It sounds like you worked some pretty long hours there, but I think you had some good times too. So we'll talk a little bit about what you did for fun here in a couple of minutes. I think it might be nice just to hear a little bit more though about the work on the telescope. So I'm going to share a few slides of some of the work in action. And Anthony and Edgar, perhaps you could tell us a little bit more. And I actually would be curious to know too about how you planned for this trip. So you're headed halfway around the world to a place where you can't just go down the street to Home Depot and pick up the tools that you forgot to bring with you. So there had to have been a lot of planning that went into this. And you obviously couldn't bring the entire telescope back with you. So just sort of curious about what that process was preparing for the trip, deciding what you were going to be bringing back home with you. And maybe I'll let you start with that, and then I'll start sharing some of the photos of the work there on the site.
Well, preparing for me, I was kind of unaware of how, what kind of tools would be available. So just knowing from my time working on the 20 meter, I knew basically what I would need. So I was just shooting for some basic hand tools that I knew would get the job done when we got there. But then once we got there, they had a ready supply of just about anything you needed. There wasn't a problem. If they didn't have it, their neighbors, Kings Bay, which takes care of the whole area, they had it. And it was amazing how they worked together and made sure we had anything we needed. And it was just nice.
Yep, planning up to the trip, we decided we were going to ship 2 boxes, which was an interesting experience because there are weight limits, there are size limits, there are all these things to shipping something to the North Pole, essentially. So we had picked out some tools, and then we had to take some of those back, and then we waited, and then we had to take some more back, and that kept happening multiple times because we also had to ship some of our clothing as well because we were going to a cold environment, and on the airplanes we can only carry so much baggage. So I was nervous before we got there about that, not having the correct tools. But when we got there, like Andrew said, Car Bearcat, the company that we were working for with the Norwegian Mapping Authority, they were very prepared, stocked up, which Didn't think about till we got there because you can't just go to the store because you're missing a wrench. So they're very prepared and they think in the future a lot more so than what we would have to do here, just because there is no other option. Once we started working, everything came down. Before we went, we kind of made a plan of what we needed. We had some parts that were integral to the success of the telescope if they broke. So we started with those, and then we realized we had more time because, like you said, the sun doesn't set. We could work as much as we wanted to work, and everyone worked well together. We had a lot of help, so everything came down. So we started getting more pieces and more pieces, and we brought back a lot more than we originally planned. But once again, we shipped everything back in a 20-foot by 8-foot shipping container. So space was limited, and you can only put so much stuff in there. So I don't think we could have got any more than we took on this trip, but it's enough to let the telescope be successful for a long time.
And from conversation I heard you all having earlier, it's a lot more fun to take apart a telescope than it is to fix one and build one. You want to tell us a little bit about the process of what parts you were scavenging?
We made sure we had at least 2 rows of panels off the telescope. That way, we'd be safe. And plus, we have a few extras in there that if there's another 20-meter telescope in Hawaii that could possibly use parts if they need them. So we made sure we had a lot of extras for that. And just going in and taking them off, you don't have to worry about if you're tearing up something on the telescope. Just don't want to tear up the parts we want to keep. So it was easy to just work through removing parts. Could be kind of rough at times, but it all worked out well and safe.
Along the lines with the mechanical stuff that Edgar's talking about, we also, to run the telescope, you have to have a lot of electronics that are involved. And this telescope was built in the 1990s, so as we all know, technology has moved a little bit forward since 1994. So, but the telescope still runs off that same software. So to us, it was very important to get any kind of circuit board, any kind of software, drawings, notes, things like that. And Carter Bearcat was, once again, very prepared for the future, and they had multiple spares that had never been used. And then we also pulled everything off the telescope that was electronic as well. One thing, when we track the direction of the telescope, we use what's called an encoder. These encoders are a very technical piece of equipment, and they're hard to get. And now we have 3 extras, which is that was a big find for me. I think that was, from my point of view, one of the most important things that we brought back for these directional encoders.
I'm going to get this one image up here because if I understand correctly, you now measure the size of a telescope panel in the unit of an Edgar. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh goodness. Let's see if I can pull our Edgar unit up. Here we go. So just some of the photos of the work.
It was our first full day on the telescope right there. So that's the first thing we decided to tackle was let's just take the panels off.
And I see a question in here that is about, from Margot and Hershey, PA. It says, we shipped items we might need. How does one ship to and from the North Pole? FedEx, UPS? It turns out that the US postal system is the only way we can get items to Ny-Ålesund, because there's this final journey that goes from Longyearbyen to Ny-Ålesund, and that is on a plane that has very strict weight limits. It's a very small plane. And if you ship from FedEx or UPS, you have to meet the package there and then arrange for that final journey. But if you ship with the US postal system, it just magically gets there. So whenever we went to the post office, in fact, they asked us if we considered shipping from UPS instead. And we said, we can't, we need to use you all. So if you need to ship to anything to the North Pole or to Santa, the US postal system is the way to go.
And it does arrive at the world's most northern coast.
Yeah.
I'm going to share a picture of that little plane because it kind of cracked me up. It's got a square fuselage here. So this was the final leg of the journey to get to. Was this the plane you took from Longyearbyen to Ny-Ålesund?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So not a whole lot of room for the carry-on baggage.
In fact, they wouldn't let you on the plane if you had your bag weighed more than 44 bags.
Your boots might weigh that much when you're headed to the Arctic.
They didn't weigh us. They just weigh your bag. So you can wear as much clothing as you want to.
So how many layers did you each have on as you were boarding the plane?
Pockets were full.
We were nervous.
Oh, goodness. All right. So another part, a lot of the discussion here, I think you all might have been on the ground for about 3 hours when rumors started to spread here that there had been a polar bear incident, which of course was not actually true, but it is a pretty serious part of planning for a trip like this. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what it's like living in an area that polar bears also call home.
So
go ahead.
Here's a picture of myself and Anthony, and anywhere in the inner part of the town, you can walk around freely. There are enough people guarding around there that you're safe. But you can see here at the exits to all the towns, all of the little roads or paths that lead out, there is a polar bear checkpoint, essentially. Anytime you go outside of that, you are required to have a rifle and a flare gun. And if you were to see a polar bear, you would collect up with your group of folks and make yourself big. Maybe that scares the polar bear off. If not, here's a picture of Anthony with a flare gun. You would shoot a flare gun in front of the polar bear to hopefully scare it back and away from you. And then the rifle is the worst case scenario, sort of the last option. But for your safety and for the safety of all the researchers that you're going with, you're required to have a rifle and a flare gun in each group. And here's a picture of our safety manager making sure we're extra safe on our journey whenever we were there.
Like you'll see on some of the hike photos that there's always a there's always a rifle sticking over the shoulder there.
I say, like, we didn't actually see a polar bear. There's a picture of we went on a glacier hike. We were a decent way away from the town there, probably 3 to 4 miles, and we saw those tracks, which was up in the glacier itself. But the fact that their presence is there, like everybody has to be on edge slightly. So you can tell every person in town, they're comfortable around weapons. And they have to be at this point, that everybody watches out for each other. And not, we would go on a hike sometimes with, let's say there's 8 people, we might only have 2 rifles with us. So it would be the responsibility of those 2 people to defend the team if need be. But that's a rare occurrence that happens. Like Will said, most of the time they use the flare gun that's not actually usually shooting a flare like you would think a flare up in the sky, like a signal flare. It's more of a flash bang type grenade. It's not a grenade that does damage, but you would shoot it off and try to skip it towards the bear on the ground so that the loud noise flash would make it.
It seems like the sign made me laugh. That was this on the shop, one of the shops in the town there.
Yeah, that was one of the shops in Longyearbyen. And actually, a few places have signs saying, "Please leave your weapon with the staff." But it's just a normal part of life there. So you got used to it pretty quickly.
Excellent. Got it. Well, we don't have much of a context is for the size of this here, but there's one of the not alive polar bears any longer. All right. Okay, so as we talked about, you all were working pretty long hours, 24-hour days there, but that also means you've got a nice long day if you are not too tired to head out and play. So Adam and Bren, could you tell us a little bit about some of the adventures that you had while you were there?
Yeah, sure. So one of them was this glacier hike that we mentioned. So everybody in town sort of knows the best spots to go because they hike regularly for activities. So there was rumor of a lake on a glacier that may or may not have been full of water. So we thought we'd take the trip up using ice spikes on our shoes to walk up the glacier. We had a guide, one of the people that worked at Carverket actually took us. And so we walked up to this just giant lake in a glacier that had running water. And we're able to hike up there and then also hike up and over the mountain to get a view of Kings Fjord or Kings Bay and a different view of Ny-Ålesund. So that was one of my favorite adventures while we were up there.
I'd say the other adventures revolved around water. And so we couldn't drive a truck with our folks. It was kind of strict with vehicles, but we could sign out and rent a boat. And so we were able to do that one Saturday or Sunday, and we took the boat up close to the ice sheet at the head of Kingsford, and that was a pretty amazing trip, just to see the sheer size and beauty of that environment and in the Arctic was just incredible. And the other side of the water fun was several of us were able to take a swim, take a dip in the bay there, and we got to do our polar bear plunge. So,
how long were you in the water for the polar bear plunge?
Not very long, but I did twice.
Like a lot for
water skiing. There were people who were able to go water skiing, and we had actually just got back from our boat trip when they did it. So it wasn't a regular occurrence. It was kind of a special event, I think.
I was about to ask what time of day you did the polar bear plunge, but I suppose up there it doesn't really matter, does it?
It was 5 o'clock in the evening because we had just got back from our first glacier adventure, and we had to be back by 5 to do our swim, and we did the swim, and then it was actually warm when you got out of the water. So you didn't shiver on the bank; you shivered in the water.
Here's a photo of your ice fishing expedition, I believe.
Yep.
Out on the boat. I think
yep.
We had some other boat photos as well.
The icebergs were melted down, and maybe a little bit of that water made it back here to West Virginia, and I'm sure it has a new purpose. It's just kind of neat, you see this piece of ice, and you think, oh, it's just a piece of ice, but the piece of ice might be 10 or 20,000 years old. So you just kind of wonder, when was this made?
And then you can see them wearing what are called survival suits. So the water is so cold that you cannot stay in it for an extended period of time. So when we did the polar plunge, you're only in for a max of 4 minutes. 4 minutes is kind of pushing it. So when you're on a boat, you have to be wearing a survival suit so that if you fall in the water, you are protected from the water. But even then, you're only safe for so long in that survival suit. So.
It's interesting too that where that picture's taken, the bay itself only looks like it's around 3 to 4 miles wide, but it's very, very deep there. Like is in the over 1,000 foot deep water, which impressed me a lot. It was like going to the Gulf Stream off the coast of North Carolina or something that takes you 30 minutes, but it's just right there. It goes from 0 to 1,000 feet in a couple hundred yards as well.
I think, Anthony, you were saying something about the size of this ice shelf here too, as well. It looks like it's a couple feet tall to me in this photo, but.
Yeah, the pictures don't do it justice because we're a little ways away. Because we got to a point where we couldn't get any closer because there was so much ice that was getting, it could have gotten dangerous if we would have continued to go, essentially. So, but for us standing there, that ice shelf is 150 plus feet tall. It's gigantic. So, but the picture just doesn't show you how breathtaking it was. Even that right there, that iceberg is humongous. It's bigger than a house. It's like a 2-story house floating right beside you. But yeah, I mean, when you get in the water, there's going to be a lot of ice, but until you get up into it, it was just amazing to me how much ice is actually in the water, the size of everything. It was very beautiful, the colors of the icebergs. It was very impressive.
You can hear the cracking of the icebergs too across the town when you hear large crashes and really deep cracks. That's actually ice falling into the bay. or just cracking from the glaciers.
Because it sounded like when we first were there, I kept thinking either there's thunder happening someplace that we can't, there's no storm, but there's this thunder you keep hearing, or there's something, they're blowing something up somewhere. But it turned out it was just the ice cracking from miles and miles and miles away. We were hearing those.
We've got Bren standing next to what looks like a potential. I don't know if that's if that would have been any of what you were hearing, but
So I think most of what we were hearing was probably from across the bay. So they have some glaciers that are more stable than others. Yep. And so that one thankfully was very stable. Otherwise, I would have had a problem standing on it. But it was very cool to see.
Yeah, these don't look like the type of glaciers. You're not walking on the glaciers where you're having to worry about crevasses and things of that sort.
No, yeah.
I think these are some shots from the hike that you did before the polar bear swim. Is that?
Yep. Yeah. That was the first glacier. We saw it from where we were working. We're like, well, we need to go to that. Let's take that hike. Mm-hmm. And which it was very impressive until we saw the second glacier that we got onto. Yeah. Kind of trumped that one.
You had a little bit of a misadventure on the way back from that hike.
Yes, our safety man was very adamant that he wanted to go on the 5 o'clock swim. So we got to a point where, looking at your watch, we're probably not going to make it unless we take a shortcut. And none of us had ever been there before. So, okay, let's take that shortcut. Well, we get to this water crossing, which that river, you can see, that's Adam standing there. So behind him is a glacier runoff. It's coming from underneath the glacier. And some of the runoffs were clear, some of them were stained like that, depending on what kind of sediment was underneath the glacier. And we got to a point where we were either going to have to backtrack multiple miles and not make the 5 o'clock polar swim, or we were going to have to suck it up and take our boots and socks and take those off and roll up our pants and cross that river. So we did do that, which was way colder than the ocean swim.
Coming straight off the ice.
Yes. And the type of rock, most of the rock that I saw, there's multiple different kinds. There was sandstone, limestone, but a lot of it was granite. So we think like the stream bed there was just little granite pebbles, which are sharp, and it felt like you were walking across broken glass, basically. But we had to do it.
Anybody know what this thing is?
Those were eggs from a snail.
Oh, cool.
Saltwater snail.
Wildlife. I got some wildlife photos here too. I'll show in just a moment. Excellent. Yeah. So what did you wildlife that you ran into? What else did you see?
We saw a ton of reindeer. We saw Arctic foxes that were grayish, not quite white yet, because it wasn't the winter season yet. Here's Bren with some of the reindeer. And these are not the reindeer that you think of when you think of nice, majestic Christmas reindeer. These have evolved to have shorter legs and rounder bellies because there is not a lot to eat on Svalbard, and all of it basically is tiny little grasses very near the ground. So they're closer to the ground and they can store up a lot of energy to last them through the winter. What else do we see? Lots of birds, seals, whales,
ducks, geese.
Ducks
and the geese do have an accent in Norway.
Yeah.
So they sounded good.
I know you had a picture of an Arctic fox here. I'm trying to see if I can find that, because most of us, when we think of the Arctic foxes, we're thinking of white, fluffy, cute. I may not be able to pull that up. I'm not finding it.
They were almost, they just weren't afraid of people. So we had several that would come within 10 feet of it, and they didn't really care. They would just continue to move and look for food, and they have to prepare for winter as well. So
the seasons change so fast there too. Like as an example, we left on the 31st, so the 31st of August, and at that point there was maybe like 1 hour of twilight happening a day. So there's 23 hours of sunlight, 1 hour of twilight. today, you know, just not even a month later, there's 12 hours of darkness happening right now. So as the season changes that fast for, you know, the people there, also it does for the wildlife there as well. So even when we were there, it seemed to me, maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but it looked like we were there for 2 weeks and the color of the foxes have changed in that small 2 weeks. Like they were going through their cycle of becoming white and becoming fluffier in such a rapid pace. It was pretty interesting to see that.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was thinking we're coming into fall here, and so I was thinking you'd be having sort of that midway between the all day and the full night. But I guess the season change happens pretty quickly there. Very short fall and very short spring. Any other adventures you want to tell us about before we head back to the work?
They have cabins dotted around the island that you can stay in. So the researchers there all pay into this fund that gives them access to things like the gym and hiking equipment and maintenance of these cabins. So we spent a night, went with the crew from the observatory and hung out in one of them. So that was nice to sort of get a little bit away from the booming downtown of Ny-Ålesund and to this cabin that was sort of on the edge of the civilization there. So yeah, here's a picture from that one. Yeah.
We actually went back later on in that week, myself, Adam, and Will, and stayed the night in that cabin because it was one of those that's out of the polar bear protected zone. So it was kind of like the little rite of passage, like, well, you might as well go camping in polar bear country if you have the chance. So we did spend the night one night in that. Dropped it, and that cabin's a little. It's one of the older cabins. As Will said, there's 12, I believe. Some of them are new, some of them are a little bit older. That one was one of the original cabins. It was over 100 years old. There's a lot of history involved in that. So people who came there to go on North Pole explorations and stuff had either been to that cabin or possibly stayed in it. So there was a lot of cool history involved in the whole part of the trip.
Are these the cabins, or is this a different spot?
That is downtown Longyearbyen, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah.
So this is still big city, right?
That's big city.
And actually, which reminds me, so we here in Green Bank, we are in the radio quiet zone. So we've got no cell service and no Wi-Fi, and it's about an hour's drive to a decent grocery store. But there you were also in a radio quiet zone, and I think it's a little bit over an hour to get to a good grocery store from Ny-Ålesund. So I'm just kind of curious, next time we're complaining here about how remote everything is here in West Virginia, what are you going to remind us of? Any examples of just how different it is trying to live daily life?
Some ways I would say it's similar. Living here pretty much my entire life, you would wait every 2 weeks or once a month to go and stock up and go to the grocery store. A lot of canned food and things. And there, they get a shipment of food once a month off of a cargo ship, and so it's similar in that sense. But if you need something, say they lose your luggage and you don't have toothpaste, you can get it from the store. But the store is only open Mondays and Thursdays, guaranteed 5:30 to 6:30, and you've got a window and you better make it, or you may not get it. So you can get things, but it's limited access. Still very limited access.
No dollar store open till 10 down there.
I think a lot of it too is different. Is like we're so used to, for instance, if you get hungry at 10 o'clock, you go get a little snack, right? From everyone gets it from the fridge or your pantry. It seemed like there, as Adam said, you only have 2 days a week for an hour at a time. You can go to the store and buy some bags of potato chips or chocolate covered pretzels or something like that. But there, everybody, you ate your 3 meals a day. They took a very serious breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you weren't snacking. You didn't plan on something like that besides, your water or whatnot for the evening. So I think the fact of how prepared they are for their day was impressive compared to how we live, where we take things for granted a little bit, I think.
you actually had, so just after you left, if I'm remembering correctly, we had some photos of snow. So they are headed into their winter season there. So Meg from Baltimore is wondering what kind of vehicles they use to get around in wintertime there.
Yeah, so they actually use a lot of snowmobiles during the winter. So we were able to see some of them while we were there. And then they have some pretty impressive trucks that they use that actually will inflate or deflate tires based off of what you need for the snow. So we switched to snow tires a lot of the time in the winter here. They just have all year tires that they inflate or deflate from just inside the car as well. So again, everybody's really prepared for pretty much any eventuality. But a lot of times we were hearing many stories about cross-country skiing as well, across glaciers and using that to get around. So there's dog sleds. Yeah, they have dogs there. If you have personal dogs, they have a dog kennel you can keep your dogs in. We actually saw people going around with what were essentially rollerblades with their dogs while we were there to exercise them. So we have a couple different options during the winter.
As far as large vehicles too, there were ships basically coming in every day at the start of our time there, tourist ships and some cargo ships, and the Coast Guard came in one day to do some inspections around. But it started to peter off at the end, and they said that all of September, I think there were only 10 ships planned, and then there weren't any ships planning on coming in until something like January.
Yeah.
So the tourism season really has a hard end, and we were straddling right there between the end of tourism season and the end of summer, really, and the beginning of winter. So there were about 130 people there whenever we went, and when we left, there were maybe 65 people on site. It drops down to about 30 people total in the winter.
So you really came in right at the end of the season to get this project finished up. Yeah. It actually, we had a question from somebody prior to the recording about they had been there on a cruise ship. And I think you actually answered their question about the telescopes that were there. But it was just interesting that they had visited on a cruise coming from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I know you had some experience with some of the tourists coming through. Brett, I remember you talking about being in the gym.
Yeah. So you have these giant groups of tourists coming in because I mean it's a really amazing place to see. But sometimes it can be a little awkward. You're running in the gym and there's a window and you're staring eye to eye with someone while you're on the treadmill. But yeah, it was very cool to see so many people be able to experience Ny-Ålesund sort of in a different way from us. Because we were really living like we were researchers while we were there. So it was kind of cool to just see people pop in and out. Because everybody, I think, had the same look that we had when we first got to Ny-Ålesund, where it was sort of a look of very much of wonder. So that was exciting.
And if there are any more questions from the audience, we're going to switch over to the education program here in just a couple of minutes. So if you have any other questions, please go ahead and submit those in the Q&A. But Meg from Baltimore has another question, which is exactly where I wanted to go next. So she's wondering if there are still researchers there in Ny-Ålesund, and what are they using and researching now? So I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what just a quick summary of what the focus of the observatory is. And I know it's not just radio astronomers there, but what is the observatory there for?
The observatory is there to measure the position of these things called quasars, which are active galactic nuclei billions of light years away from the Earth. And the reason that they're doing that is to try to see if the Earth is moving in weird ways, if it's wobbling on its axis. So they're working with observatories from around the world to measure that little wobble. They are there because of the location of Svalbard on the Earth, so close to the North Pole, that there's no other observatory that has that same kind of coverage. So they're sort of unique. And if they stopped operating, then GPS would lose something like 30% of its sensitivity within a month. So without that facility there, right, you wouldn't be able to tell where your air tags are or where you are on the road or anything like that. So the observatory is only one part of the science that's going on up there. Most of it is marine biology and climate and studying organisms around Svalbard. And a lot of those scientists will come into this observatory or into the site in the summer, set up their experiments, do experiments, and then if they have anything to run through the winter, they will set it up and they won't come back and see it until May or so. So we talked with folks who were there picking up experiments that they had dropped off a year prior, basically, and it recorded all kinds of data either in the ocean or up on the glaciers, and they were just coming to collect it.
An extreme place to be planning your experiments. So excellent. All right, we are about at the mark where I think we need to transition towards the education program. So I just want to invite you all, if there's anything else that you'd like to share that we didn't touch on, that any favorite memories from the trip, anything that that really surprised you or that you still find yourself thinking about now that we're 2 or 3 weeks out?
I mean, I have really good feelings about all the people that we met in general. It was a really solid group of folks, both at the observatory and then all the other researchers and technicians that we met up there. We're hoping to get some of the folks that we met over in Norway to come over to our observatory and participate in some of our events too. So I was talking with one of the engineers who wants to come over for a workshop that we're having next summer, for instance. So just building these collaborations with folks from across the world who were so kind to give us all of this equipment. And they didn't have to, right? We didn't own the equipment. They just said that it was a gesture of friendship from one observatory to another. So just a lot of good feelings about the people and their intentions for the trip.
It's a great opportunity for collaboration, which you don't, I'm sure for them, being in such a remote place, having that opportunity to have you all there must have been a real treat for them as well. So, all right. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to go ahead and transition over to Sue-Ann is going to give us an overview of the 20 meter and just give us a demonstration of what an observation on a radio telescope might look like. And Sue-Ann, as we switch over, I also just want to share, we had a question come in from somebody before the program who participates in citizen science and is just wondering if there are any opportunities to do citizen science on the 20 meter telescope. So that may be something that you can talk about throughout the program, but I just wanted to mention that in case it comes up.
I'm muted. I said it before you did. Thanks a lot. It was fun to hear it, hear what you all did up there, and I'm still jealous. I didn't get to go, but I didn't have any skills that would have been useful up there. So everybody, I'm going to share my screen a little bit now too, and just tell you a little bit about the 20 meter and something called the Skynet robotic telescope network. So the 20 meter telescope, as Will was saying earlier, was built here at the observatory to work with other telescopes around the world to measure wobbles in the Earth by looking at really far away astronomical objects and using those as reference sources. But when the effort shrank a little bit, the Navy, the U.S. Naval Observatory, turned the 20 meter telescope here in Green Bank over to the observatory. They said, we're done with it. Here you go. You can have this telescope now. And we immediately wondered, what we could do with it. And several years later, we worked with a team of folks based out of the University of North Carolina to put the 20 meter telescope on the Skynet robotic telescope network. So this is the homepage of the Skynet robotic telescope network. And this network is mostly optical telescopes, and the 20 meter radio telescope is the only radio telescope on the network at the moment, although they're building some small radio telescopes to add to the network now. And so if we look at the observatory, if I change let's see, I wonder if I can do that from here. Maybe not. I'll do that in a minute. But our little 20 meters right outside my window here and down the road, and we're going to make it move, and I'll try to switch my camera so that you can see that. So the telescope nowadays is used by 3 different groups of people. We are allocated some telescope time to use it for education. And we engage high school students and undergraduate students all across the country, and in fact, across the world, in learning how to use this telescope. And they can conduct projects, observational projects using the 20-meter telescope. We're given telescope time. The observatory is generous enough to allow us to do these educational things with the 20-meter telescope. But it's a great telescope. It's not the biggest radio telescope in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a great telescope. And so it's also used occasionally by scientists who can purchase telescope time, or by commercial companies that want to track a satellite or something like that. And they also can purchase time on the telescope. So that's what it's morphed into, although originally it was here, built by the U.S. Naval Observatory to look at wobbles in the Earth's axis. So if you want to use a 20-meter telescope, I've got it open right here. I've got the Skynet Robotic Telescope Network site open. And in order to use the telescope, I just have to put in some commands very similarly to the way you'd use the big Green Bank telescope here on the property. So what you do as an astronomer is you set up an observing script, and then you give that script to your telescope, essentially, and the telescope will execute that script. And so what we're going to do right now is set up a telescope observing script and see if the 20-meter will do it for us. It looks like nobody's using it right now, which is good. There's a lot of people all over the country that have little bits of telescope time, and so they could take control of the telescope and use it in the middle of our demo here. I hope that doesn't happen. So if you have any questions about what I'm saying as we go through this, you can pop them in the Q&A. Angela, you can let me know what they are, and I'll stop what I'm doing and try to answer them. So I'm going to go to my observatory. I have logged in. You have to have an account on the Skynet Robotic Telescope Network. So I'm logged in with my account, and I'm going to go to this tab called My Observatory. I'm going to go to radio observing because we're using a radio telescope. So I'm going to click on that. And then the next step really is to add a new observation. On this page, you can see that I've taken a lot of data already, and that's what all of these lines are here, are different observations that I've already made. But we're going to make one right now together. And so I want to click on Add New Observation. And then what you see is a very important green ball on the left-hand side of the screen. And that green ball is a view of the sky right now over Green Bank Observatory. So this is the part of the sky that the 20-meter telescope can look at right now. And I can elect to, let's see what stars are up right now, even though it's daytime. These are the stars that are up in the sky right now over Green Bank Observatory. And if I click on a star, I'll get some sort of a weird little picture here on the right-hand side. I can click on stars, and I'll get an image from a database of stars that exists. But I'm not really interested in stars. Stars, as it turns out, don't make really good targets for a radio telescope, so I like to click them off. But I could put on some galaxies. Maybe we want to see what a different galaxy looks like. So I could click on any one of these galaxies and see what it looks like to an optical telescope, and then I could decide whether or not I wanted to use a radio telescope to look at it. I can click on the solar system. Let me get the galaxies off. So if I click on the solar system, you can see that right now over the 20-meter telescope, Mercury is up, the sun is visible, Mars is visible, Pluto's up over there. And so these are all different objects that we can just click on them and start our observing script right now. If you wanted to look at an object that's not up yet, it's going to rise later, like Saturn is right here on the edge. That's not a good target for us right now because it's on the edge of the horizon where the horizon and the Earth meet. So that's not up high enough yet really for us to look at it. But we could click on it now, and then it would observe it later for us. So I'm going to pick something. I want to pick something maybe in I'm going to pick W51 just because it might, the telescope might move in an interesting direction. So I want to click on W51. This is a star forming region in the sky. It's a nice bright radio object, so it doesn't show us very much in this picture here, but it might be bright to our radio telescope. And then I'm going to scroll on down here until I can see this graph. And this graph tells me that from now until about 9 hours from now, the object is going to be in the sky. And then it's going to set, and it won't be available for another several hours until it rises again. So this graph just tells me if my target is visible, how long it's going to be visible before it sets, and we have to wait another day to see it. So that's cool. We like that. It's up, and we should be able to see it for a while. So that was the first screen. We only have a few screens that we have to go through when we make an observation. So it's a pretty easy telescope to use. So we picked our target. This screen is all about setting up the equipment that detects the signal. And so we're going to have to make some decisions about how we want our detector to work. And then we're going to tell the telescope how to collect data, how to move. And then we're going to review what we did. So we're on the receiver screen right now. Now, for this object, we can look at it in a very simple way, which is what we're going to do first. So we're going to try this mode called low resolution mode. And you could choose high if you wanted. We're going to stay on low. And we're going to keep this little filter in place. This filter will keep some of the radio frequency interference. Well, you know what? Maybe looking at some radio frequency interference would be interesting. So I'm going to get rid of the filter. And we're going to look at lots and lots of different receiver frequencies all at once. And we'll save and continue that. So one of the simplest telescope motions that you can do is called a daisy pattern. And that we're going to ask the 20-meter telescope to loop itself, to move in a looping pattern over the object several times and collect data as it does that. So we have to tell the 20-meter how big we want each of our daisy petals to be. And I'm going to say 180 arc minutes. And we'll stick with 4 petals so the observation doesn't take too long. And I'm going to say that we want our observation to last 40 seconds per petal. So we have 4 petals times 40 seconds. That's 160 seconds. And then I'm going to save and continue. Okay, so this is our summary. This is the object that we picked. This is the location in the sky. This is where it's located in the sky, sort of the latitude and longitude in the sky. This is our receiver mode is going to be low resolution, and we're going to do a daisy with 4 petals. So everything we just selected is right there for us to make one check. And now we're going to submit our observation. So now the observation is ready. Does that mean it's going to do the observation now? No, it doesn't, because the 20-meter operates on a queue system, if you know what I mean, on a list. And so observations could come in from all over the country, and the 20-meter telescope has to figure out what to do first. And so there's a computer program that analyzes all the different observation requests that are coming in and tries to pick a sensible pattern for which ones to observe and which ones to observe next, and so on. So just because it says it's ready doesn't mean it's going to do it right now, but we're going to check and see if it's doing our observation or not. Oh, cool. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute and show you a very silly picture, but we're going to look at it for a second. Okay. So this is the view out of my window with a silly little webcam. And if you look all the way over, you got to forget about the white vehicle, look in the background. And there's a telescope on the left-hand side, almost on the edge. That's the 20-meter telescope. And you can see that the dish is showing, it's nice and white. It's not pointed straight up. And that right there is the telescope moving toward W51. Underwhelming, but that's it doing it. So it's doing what we told it to. So now I'll share my screen again and we'll look at it in a different way. So if I go over here to telescope sites, I'm going to go to Green Bank Observatory. So you can see that it's executing our observation right now, which is awesome. And if I click on this link, it's going to show us the sky again. But now the bullseye is over the object that we want to observe. And we can see some data coming in on the bottom. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see the telescope moving. This bullseye is the telescope. And it is sweeping underneath this little X, which is W51. And as it does so, you can see the data coming in. So it's telling us how much power we're detecting from the sky. We have a lot of interference. See all these little spiky things? That's radio frequency interference. But these big humps, watch what happens when this bullseye passes back underneath the W51 location. Let's see a lot more power being detected by the telescope when the telescope sweeps underneath W51. And it's going to do it 4 times. I think it's got 1 more time to go. You might be wondering, so all these little dots are stars. Again, they're not good targets for radio telescopes. But that red line is actually the Milky Way. So W51 is right there next to the equator of the Milky Way. And that's what the red line is showing us. Okay, and then we're going to get to the end of the observation, and I'll show you what the data looks like, and then that's what it's like to observe. Okay, so we're almost finished. Okay, so now I'll go back to my observatory. I'll click on radio observing again, and you can see that the W51 observation has been completed. That's its status. Now to get to the data, we click on this link here on the left, and then we click on this one. I'm going really quick. I don't know whether the data will be processed yet or not. Sometimes it looks really funky until you give it a minute or two. But that looks good, actually. That looks great. Okay, so this is a picture of the data we collected. On the left, you see a graph that we saw. We saw that in real time, and this is the graph that resulted from the telescope sweeping underneath the object 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And all of this noisy looking stuff is either interference or some of it could be coming from the Milky Way. If we look at the graph on the right, this is a picture of all the signals at different frequencies that our receiver can pick up. So it's like looking at your radio dial, you know, in your car radio. If you could take a picture of all the radio stations that you could see on the radio dial, all these spikes are spikes of energy coming into the telescope. And we don't like these. This is called radio frequency interference. All of these spikes here are radio frequency interference from satellites and other ground-based sources. So these are the things we try to get rid of in our data. Down in the bottom, you see the path that the telescope made. And then you see that the software tried to take the data that we collected and convert it into a radio image. And so this bright red spot here in the middle corresponds to the signals you see in the upper left. And that's just kind of showing you a radio picture of the data that we collected. So that's a very simple observation with the telescope. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't see any questions coming in, Suyan, but could you tell us if somebody was interested in an opportunity to use a radio telescope? Are there opportunities for the general public to do that?
Well, we will visit if you are a club of some kind or of any kind, really, whether it be a Lions Club or anything else, and you want to have a real-time session like this and gain a little telescope time, we can do that. But the 20-meter telescope is really focused on educational projects. And so we do have a couple of ongoing projects where students engage and teachers engage and professors engage with the telescope, and they get telescope time to do it. And that one is called, the big one is called the Pulsar Science Collaboratory. And so students use the 20-meter telescope, and their teachers do as well, to follow up on pulsars and do some science with that. So that's the closest thing we have to a citizen science project with the 20-meter telescope. But you could join the Society of Amateur Radio Astronomers, and then you get either they have an account and you could use the 20-meter telescope with them, or some other astronomical group in your area. There may be a local astronomy club, and you could say, hey, I just saw a radio telescope. Let's see if we can get some time on the telescope, because we do give telescope time out to groups like that as well.
Excellent. So I'm going to just go ahead and do a quick screen share to wrap up our hour here. We're running just a minute or so over. Let me get that slide into full view here for us. But you can certainly request a virtual program. We also have programs right here on site. So if you're close to Green Bank or you're interested in coming for a visit, we would love to have you come on by. So we offer programs here on site. We offer public tours every day that the Science Center is open. You can check that out on our website for the hours. We offer free education programs for student groups and youth groups. So if you have a group that you want to bring just for a day trip, you can come for a tour and some activities related to radio astronomy. If you have a group that you want to bring for an overnight visit, you can also have an opportunity to do some hands-on work with a radio telescope. We have a smaller radio telescope here on site. It is a 40-foot telescope. I don't think you can see it in the background there in that photograph, but that's a really great chance for folks to actually get to operate a radio telescope and collect data right here in Green Bank. So if you're interested in either of those programs, you can check them out on our website. We are at greenbankobservatory.org, or you can email us at visit@gbobservatory.org. And that will come to the education program. We can make a reservation for your visit. Anything you'd like to add, Sue Ann?
I just want to say thanks, everybody, for joining us today. We appreciate you giving us some of your time to hear about what goes on around here.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.